Greetings students, Mr. Sanger back with you to kick off Unit 7, Genetics. So in this unit we are going to be looking at the rules that sort of govern how traits and characteristics are passed from parent to child through many generations. So for example, if you think about your parents, your siblings, people who you're related to, you could probably figure out things that you have in common. I'm tall like my dad. I'm tidy like my mom. But then there's also things that you probably are different, would say you're different as compared to other people in your family. And so what are the rules that sort of determine how are traits passed on from parent to child? That's what this unit is all about. Our objectives for the next screencast or two is, one, we're going to explain Mendel's contributions to the study of genetics. You should have already read an article, a little reading activity about Gregor Mendel and his pea plant experiments. We'll go through that a little bit today. Explain how the results of these experiments led to the laws of segregation and independent assortment, and then relate those two laws to the events of meiosis. Finally, explain how the recombination of genes during sexual reproduction increases genetic variation within a species. Explain how gametes, the egg and sperm cells, are formed and how they combine to form a zygote. And then the last ones are all about some really important vocabulary: allele, genotype, phenotype, dominant, recessive, homozygous, heterozygous. All of that is going to be really important vocabulary for your success in this unit. So kind of a lot of objectives, so let's get into it. So yesterday you read about Gregor Mendel and his experiment with garden peas. So just to create some context, remember, Mendel did not know a whole lot about DNA. He didn't know about chromosomes. He didn't know about genes. He didn't know anything. He was just trying to figure out, how are traits passed from parent to offspring. But there were some keys to his success based on his experiments. One, he chose a good experimental organism to use. So peas are small, they grow easily, they produce a lot of offspring, and that allowed him to get some good data. You could imagine if you were trying to breed, blue whales and study the results of genetic crosses in blue whales, that would, it takes about a year for a mother whale to give birth to a child whale, and you only get one. So that obviously would not be a good choice if you're studying how traits are passed. Garden peas, rock solid choice. So here's a bunch of peas. Second, peas have traits that exist in two distinct forms. Flower color is either purple or it's white. Seed color is either yellow or it's green. Seed shape is either round or it's wrinkled. It's kind of one or the other. And that's actually sort of a simple mode of inheritance. If you think about a trait like height, there's not just short or tall, there's all these ranges in between. Kind of short, sort of tall, medium. And so that would not have been a good trait for him to study because it's a lot more complex than these simple ones. Another key to success was he used math. He counted. And in counting how many different peas of different types he got, he found these very distinct ratios, 3-to-1 ratio, 3-to-1 ratio. And they're not exactly 3-to-1, but they're kind of close. And that kind of made him think, something's going on here. So by counting, he was able to sort of discover some patterns that otherwise would not have been stumbled upon. So here's what he did. And again, you read about this. He took two parents. He took what's called true breeding purple flower plant. In other words, if you cross two true breeding purple plants, they will always give you purple flowered offspring. And he crossed that with a white true breeding flower. If you cross white true breeding plants together, they will always give you white flowers. So the purples will always give you purple. The whites will always give you white. What happens if you mix them? Now, at the time, people sort of thought that traits kind of blended together, and he thought, maybe a light lavender or something kind of in the middle. But to his surprise, every single one of the offspring plants had purple flowers. What happened to the white trait? Well, that's weird. So then he took these purple ones, and he crossed these offspring purples with one another, and the results of that was he got some white ones back. So why in that first generation did we get all purple, and then why in the second generation did the white one come back? That's weird. Something's going on, something interesting. Further, it wasn't just random white ones, it was a very distinct ratio. It was roughly a 3-to-1 ratio of purple to white flowers. And so Mendel had to make sense of this pattern and figure out what was going on. How do we account for that 3-to-1 ratio? So in figuring all this out, he devised some very important vocabulary that, again, you read about yesterday. First, allele. An allele simply means the different versions of a trait. Diploid organisms have 2 alleles for each trait. For the flower color, we represent the purple color with big F, the white flower with little f. That's an allele, big F or little f. Again, diploid organisms have 2 copies of each gene, so they would have 2 alleles. Okay. And yeah, so these different traits. There'd be an allele for yellow seed color, an allele for green seed color, etc. The next pair of terms were genotype and phenotype. So the genotype means the 2 alleles that an individual has. Think it's genes, genotype, genes. Phenotype is the physical appearance of an individual. Phenotype, physical appearance. And so for these plants, a true breeding purple flower plant, again, the genotype, since we have 2 alleles, we're going to need 2 letters. And since it's true breeding, those 2 letters are probably both that big F. So the genotype would be big F, big F. The phenotype, the physical result, would be purple. What about a true breeding white? Take a moment, hit pause. What do you think for the genotype for the white and the phenotype for the true breeding white? Okay, you back? Hopefully you said the genotype for the white flower was little f, and the phenotype was white, physical appearance. The next pair of terms were dominant and recessive. A dominant allele is one that is expressed even if only 1 copy is present. A recessive allele is only expressed if 2 copies are present. So in this example, you may remember Mendel crossed a purple with a white and they all ended up purple. So that must mean that the purple color is dominant and the white color is recessive. Finally, homozygous and heterozygous. Homozygous means both alleles in the genotype are the same. Heterozygous means both alleles in the genotype are different. And so the parental purple here we already established was big F, big F. The parental white was little f. And so these would both be considered homozygous genotypes because they're the same. 2 big Fs, 2 little f's. This F1 purple, though, got a big F from the purple flower plant and a little f from the white. And so it's going to be big F, little f, which means it is heterozygous. They're different. And since the big F is purple and dominant, the phenotype is purple. Are you starting to see how important this terminology is and how it all weaves together? So you really do need to master this vocabulary. And that's a little joke for you. So in our next screencast, we're going to take these terms and what we just discussed and use them to actually explain Mendel's experiments in the context of the life cycle and meiosis. So stay tuned.